It was the kind of Oregon rain that soaked everything it touched, slow, steady, and bone deep. I was driving home from my evening shift at the college library, the wipers barely keeping up as I squinted through the windshield. The dashboard glowed faintly in the dark and the road was nearly empty. Just me, the hum of tires on wet pavement, and my thoughts mostly about whether I'd remembered to pay the electric bill and if I had enough leftovers to get through the week. I don't remember the crash. 1 minute I was adjusting the heater, and the next it was noise. Metal glass and the kind of impact that rips memory in half. They told me later, a deer bolted into the road that I swerved too hard, clipped the guardrail, and the car rolled into a ditch. All I know is when I opened my eyes, everything smelled like antiseptic and artificial lemon. My throat burned. My head throbbed. A man was sitting beside the bed in a county sheriff's jacket. His name tag read, Rains. He looked tired but kind, the sort of man who didn't flinch around blood. "You're awake," he said quietly. "Lorena, right?" I nodded, but even that small movement made me wince. "You're lucky. The car's totaled, but you made it through." He paused, then glanced down at the clipboard on his lap. "We found your wallet. Your ID was next to another vehicle that caught fire. The other driver didn't make it. Your daughter. She thought you were in that car." I blinked at him. "Jessa. She already filed the insurance claim," he said. "Declared you dead." It took me a few seconds to understand the words. Then another moment to realize what he wasn't saying out loud. She hadn't come to the hospital. She hadn't waited for confirmation. She had gone straight to the paperwork. He leaned forward, his voice low and careful. It was quick. Too quick. That's why I came in person. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I stared at the pale green walls and thought about the last text Jessa sent me, a single-word reply to my birthday message. "Thanks." Deputy Rains cleared his throat. "We can notify the insurance company. Stop it all now." I looked at him, the fog in my mind sharpening into something colder. "No," I said. "Let her believe I'm gone. When Jessa was little, she used to call me her best friend." I still remember her small fingers gripping mine on the walk to school, the way she'd lean against my shoulder during thunderstorms, her breath warm and even, trusting the world because I was there. Those memories feel like lies now. It started changing her junior year of college. The phone calls got shorter. She stopped coming home for holidays. When I visited her campus once unannounced, she met me in the parking lot and never let me inside her apartment. Said she was late for class. Her eyes didn't meet mine the way they used to. At first, I told myself it was just growing pains. She was busy independent. I wanted to believe I'd raised her right, that maybe I'd given her so much strength she didn't think she needed me anymore. But there were cracks I couldn't ignore. One spring, I mailed her a birthday card with a check $200 scraped together from extra shifts. Months later, I found it still in the envelope, unopened, at the bottom of her old dresser drawer when I was packing it for Goodwill. That same summer, I overheard her whispering on the phone in the kitchen, telling someone she's barely hanging on. But I've got a plan. I should have asked more questions. Should have pressed her harder. But I didn't want to believe that Jessa, the girl I nursed through asthma attacks and stayed up nights tutoring, could look at me and see nothing but wait. Now, lying in a hospital bed with a stranger telling me my daughter had already signed the paperwork for my death benefits, I realized those unanswered calls and missed holidays weren't neglect. They were preparation. She wasn't drifting away. She was stepping back to get a better angle. Deputy Rains looked like he was waiting for something, maybe regret or hesitation. But all I felt was stillness. The kind that comes after an earthquake when the ground stops moving and everything broken starts settling into place. "Then we do this my way," I told him. The cabin was 30 minutes outside town, past 2 gravel roads and a faded wooden sign that simply read, Rains. It sat on the edge of a lake so still it looked like glass, broken only by the occasional ripple of wind or a startled bird. No cell service, no internet. Just me, a borrowed duffel bag, and silence so complete I could hear my heartbeat when I lay down. Theo dropped me off with a sack of groceries, a thermos of coffee, and a promise to check in each morning. 3 days, he said. That's how long I can keep your record flagged without triggering a deeper review. After that, it gets harder. I nodded. 3 days is all I need. The first night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the wooden ceiling, tracing the knots in the grain, remembering Jessa's 6th grade choir recital. She forgot the words, burst into tears mid-song, and I rushed to the stage to hold her. The audience laughed. She cried into my sweater. I thought I'd done something right that night. Maybe I was wrong. By the second day, my grief hardened into something else, anger, with edges sharp enough to carve through bone. I watched the trees sway outside the window and thought about how easy it had been for her. A phone call, a signature. That's all it took to erase me. Theo showed up before dusk, carrying a folded pamphlet in one hand. This just hit town. Your funeral's set for tomorrow. He passed it to me. There I was, 8th grade science fair photo braces, and all holding a plastic trophy. The caption read, "She was quiet, but always tried to do the right thing." Tried, I said flatly. Even dead, they can't give me that. Theo sat across from me, his face softening. I lost my sister to people like your daughter. She wasn't strong enough to get out. You are. I didn't reply. I just folded the pamphlet and set it on the table beside me. Tomorrow, I'd walk into the room where they were burying a lie and bring the truth with me. I arrived 5 minutes after the service began. Theo drove around back and parked near the kitchen entrance, away from the cars lined neatly out front. I wore sunglasses too large for my face and a navy blazer borrowed from Theo's ex-wife. No one looked twice as I slipped in through the side door and took a seat in the last pew, far enough from the front that my breath wouldn't stir the air around them. The casket was closed, draped in cream-colored flowers. My photo middle school brace's awkward smile rested on an easel by the altar. I stared at it, numb. They couldn't even find a picture from the last decade, or maybe they didn't want to. Jessa stood behind the lectern, her voice trembling with just enough drama to be believable. My mother was complicated, she began. She had her struggles, but she tried. And in the end, she deserved peace. She sniffled, dabbing her cheek with a tissue someone had likely handed her for effect. People murmured around me, nodding, comforting one another. Strangers grieving a woman they didn't know because the woman they were told about never existed. A man in a gray suit leaned over to Jessa as she stepped down. I recognized him from the insurance firm's website. His lips moved close to her ear, but I still caught the words. Policy clears Monday. Jessa nodded, barely containing a smile. Half goes straight to my business account, the other into the estate trust. Keep it clean. Clean. As if there weren't a real body behind this farce. As if I wasn't sitting 20 feet away hearing my own daughter allocate my life like a spreadsheet. My fingers curled tightly in my lap. Every part of me wanted to stand, scream, pull off the sunglasses, and let the truth shatter the room. But I waited. Just one more moment. Jessa turned to hug a woman I didn't recognize. The tears now dry. Her posture relaxed. She laughed softly at something. The man from the insurance office handed her a folder. I rose slowly and stepped into the aisle, feeling every eye in the room begin to shift as I walked forward. Every footstep echoed like a thunderclap across the polished floor. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. And then the gasp-sharp collective unmistakable. A ripple of disbelief spread through the church as I kept walking toward the front, slow and steady like the casket wasn't just empty, but had been waiting for me all along. Jessa saw me before she understood. Her face registered confusion first, then disbelief, then something colder. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I stopped halfway down the aisle and pulled off the sunglasses. The air felt electric, like the seconds before a storm breaks. "Surprised to see me," I said. The room went silent. Someone dropped a program. The man in the suit stepped back, like I was contagious. Jessa's mouth moved without sound. She blinked once, twice. "But you were gone." "No," I said, my voice louder now. "You just hoped I was." Behind me, Deputy Rains stepped into view, calm and sure. He held up the small recorder in his hand without a word. The sound of shuffling feet and held breaths filled the space between us. Jessa looked around, desperate for an ally, but all she saw were stunned faces. People who'd just finished grieving a woman they never really knew, realizing they'd been cast in a play they didn't sign up for. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "You can't just—" "You buried a box and tried to cash me in," I said. "You lied to your friends, the insurance company, to everyone here. You gave me a eulogy while negotiating my payout." My heart pounded, but my voice didn't waver. "I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for the truth." Jessa took a step back. "It was a mistake. They said you were in the car. I didn't." "You signed the claim within 24 hours, Deputy Rains said calmly. "No autopsy, no confirmation. Just money on your mind." The man in the gray suit slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, dialing. His eyes never left Jessa. I didn't move. I just watched as her world started to close in, brick by brick, lie by lie. The headline hit before I even made it home. "Daughter fakes mother's death for $500K insurance payout. Mom walks into funeral alive." By morning, every local paper blog and news station had picked it up. Photos from the church leaked me standing at the front. Jessa frozen behind me. The image spread faster than the truth ever had when I was just a tired, invisible mother behind a library desk. Strangers recognized me at the grocery store. Some offered quiet nods of support. Others stared too long, unsure of how to categorize me, victim or spectacle. I wasn't used to attention, but I stood in it anyway. Jessa, on the other hand, disappeared. Her phone went dark. Friends who used to fill her comment sections with praise now left silence or worse. Her online shop closed. Her business partners issued statements. "We had no knowledge of Ms. Langford's actions and have severed ties immediately." One even called to apologize to me personally. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy writing. Theo helped me draft the first article. I titled it, "When Love Turns Transactional." What it feels like to be valued, more in death than in life. It ran in the State Journal the following week. I wrote about the little things, missed birthdays, unopened cards, the way Jessa stopped saying mom and started using she when talking about me in public. I didn't name her. I didn't need to. Other mothers wrote to me. A woman from Ohio said her son had emptied her savings. A retired nurse in Idaho said her daughter hadn't spoken to her since she stopped co-signing credit cards. They weren't trying to shame their children. They just wanted to be seen. Wanted to know they weren't the only ones. The noise kept growing, but somewhere inside it, I found clarity. Jessa had buried me in more ways than one. But the part of me she'd tried to erase, the part that still believed in my worth, was finally breathing again. And breathing was only the beginning. The courtroom smelled like varnished wood and nerves. Jessa sat across from me in a tailored navy suit, hair smoothed into submission face, arranged into remorse. Her lawyer painted her as a grieving daughter caught in a bureaucratic error. She believed her mother had died. She moved quickly, out of shock, out of love. I said nothing as he spoke. I just watched Jessa nod slowly, the practiced tremble in her lower lip almost convincing. When it was my turn, I stood with steady hands and gave them the truth. I told the jury about the funeral brochure, the overheard conversation, the split-second calculations spoken like business terms. Then, I pulled the letter from my purse. It was on her stationery, the expensive kind she used for networking thank you notes. Dated 6 months before the crash. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still sharp. If anything ever happens to her, I get it all. She won't know how to use money anyway. It's better off in my hands. The room shifted. I didn't look at Jessa. I didn't have to. The silence around her said enough. The prosecutor walked the jury through the timeline. The claim filed within 24 hours, the lack of a death certificate, the absence of any attempt to identify the body. Grief doesn't look like this, she said. Grief doesn't sound like wire transfers and spreadsheets. Jessa didn't speak again. Her eyes stayed locked on the table as if she could hide in the grain of the wood. I stepped down from the stand with a weight lifted I hadn't known I was still carrying. Not because I'd hurt her, but because I'd finally stopped protecting the version of her I used to love. When the jury filed out, Theo squeezed my shoulder. You did what you had to do. I nodded, my gaze still locked on the empty chair where Jessa had sat. And what I had to do next was let her go. I didn't go to sentencing. I knew what the judge would say, words like restitution and fraud and intent. But no amount of years or legal terms could translate the real sentence already served between us. Instead, I drove to Wallace Park, the one with the duck pond, and the crooked slide Jessa used to love when she was 5. We'd come here after Sunday pancakes, her tiny sneakers slapping the path as she ran ahead, always turning back to make sure I was still there. I sat on the same bench I used to wait on, while she fed breadcrumbs to birds. The wood was more worn now, and so was I. A part of me had held on to the hope that somewhere beneath the coldness, the silence, the lies, my little girl still lived. That maybe the woman who filed that insurance claim was just angry, lost in need of something I'd failed to give. But sitting there, watching a new generation of children chase bubbles and laughter, I realized something I hadn't dared to say out loud. That little girl was gone. Maybe she'd been fading for years. Maybe she only ever existed in my memory. I whispered it to the wind like a prayer, not for her, but for me. You're free now, I said, quietly. So am I. I left a single photo tucked under the bench. It was from that same park 15 years earlier, Jessa mid-jump, arms outstretched, laughing toward the sky. And then I walked away, not looking back. I had spent enough of my life chasing a version of her that no longer existed. There was still something left to build, something that had nothing to do with what I'd lost. The op-ed ran in the Sunday edition under the headline, "When Love Fails You First." I hadn't planned to write it, but the words poured out like water bursting a dam. I didn't name Jessa. I didn't need to. The story was mine, and this time I wasn't writing to explain her. I was writing to find myself. Within days, letters arrived. Emails from women in Michigan, Arizona, even Australia. Mothers who'd been erased from their children's lives with silence or cruelty, all wondering the same thing I once did. Was it my fault? I started replying one by one, then created a forum. We met over Zoom, exchanged stories, reminders, and small victories. It didn't feel like fixing anything, but it felt like finally being seen. Theo called once a week, sometimes twice. He never pushed, just listened, offered small stories of his own. One night after I told him I'd been invited to speak at a community support circle, he said something I still think about. You rebuilt what they tried to erase. I let the words sit before replying. I didn't know I could. You did, he said. You just forgot for a while. I started keeping a notebook. Not for Jessa. Not for what happened. But for what came next. Names of women I'd met. Quotes that made me breathe easier. Ideas for something larger, something permanent. Something born from what nearly destroyed me. By spring, I had filed paperwork to register a nonprofit. I named it Ash Root, a place for women who had been cut out, cast off, or left behind, and were done waiting to be claimed. I sent Theo a photo of the logo, simple, bold, a tree growing from black soil. He wrote back in 2 words, "It lives." It had been almost 5 years since the day I walked into my own funeral. Long enough for most people to forget. But not me. Not the women who showed up at the doorsteps of Ash Root with duffel bags and stories that sounded far too familiar. We'd outgrown the forum, then the office, then the rental hall. Now we had a shelter our own, and today they named a wing after me. I stood near the entrance as the ribbon was cut, my name stenciled across glass in quiet, graceful lettering. The Lorena Wing for Women Who Refused to Disappear. Inside, a mural stretched across the main hallway. It showed a woman stepping through flames, not untouched, but unbroken. Her eyes weren't wide with fear. They were steady, knowing. Behind her, the fire still burned. Beneath her feet, green shoots pushed through ash. At the bottom, in bold paint, "You are not disposable." I didn't know who painted it, one of the residents, someone's daughter, maybe. It didn't matter. She knew. Somehow she knew. Theo stood beside me, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the mural. "It's exactly right," he said. I nodded, words thick in my throat. "They tried to kill something that never really died." He looked at me, then quiet for a moment. "They tried to bury you." I smiled, but I was the seed. The hallway buzzed with laughter behind us. Children's footsteps echoed off the tile. In the distance, someone was teaching a song on a beat-up old piano. I walked forward, letting the warmth rise up to meet me. This time I didn't flinch. I kept going. I had been many things in this life, mother mistake memory. But today, I was something else entirely. I was proof.